The fact that Five Nights at Freddy's 3 was supposed to be the last game in the franchise, I find to be kind of laughable. Don't get me wrong, I do like this game, even though personally I find it very lackluster. Not just as a part of the franchise, but also just as a game that was supposed to end the series. Whether it be certain gameplay decisions or how by the end of the game, no matter what ending you get, it doesn't explain anything, which is unfortunate because I do like Five Nights at Freddy's 3. I do. But I just find it such a lackluster game that I never really feel a desire to come back to it. The graphics of this game, they still look good. Unfortunately, one of the biggest problems of the early Five Nights at Freddy's games, there isn't really much that can be said or really much that could have been done because the early games are 2D, so not really much you can do. However, unlike Five Nights at Freddy's 1 and 2, FNAF 3 has like a green filter, which I find kind of weird compared to how the previous games looked. That, while you could say it's supposed to give off, a sickly, haunted vibe because you're working at an amusement park, it doesn't give me the same feeling as being in a normal office, like in Five Nights at Freddy's 1 or 2. I know it's trying to be haunting, but I always found it to be a weird choice for Scott to do, and, I do think green can be scary with something like night vision from the Outlast games, but in this game, I don't think it works, and it just looks weird. So, the first night, you literally do nothing. And while the first night is normally never that bad and used for you to get used to the controls and gameplay, I prefer how Five Nights at Freddy's 1 and 2 did it because the animatronics, they wouldn't come after you until like 3 o'clock. And then Bonnie and Chica would start making their way to your office. However, Five Nights at Freddy's 3, the first night, you literally do nothing. There are no threats or anything. In fact, I think the phone call is extremely long to try and make up for this. But it doesn't really help. Now, you may be asking, why is there no threat on night 1? And that's because in this game, there aren't any animatronics. In fact, I think this game takes place 30 years after FNAF 2 and I think 10 years after Five Nights at Freddy's 1. And all the animatronics have been broken down and destroyed, so there's nothing to worry about or to fear. However, that changes once we get to night 2.
Dude, these are like prehistoric. I think they were like training tapes for like other employees or something like that. So I thought we could like have them playing like over the speakers as people walk through the attraction. Dude, that makes it feel legit, man. But I have an even better surprise for you. You're not gonna believe this. We found one. A real one.
Night 2 is when you actually start playing and have to worry about a threat, and as Phone Dude told us, they found a real animatronics and we see Springtrap, which I think is so great in this game because of his design and the lore behind him. However, the unfortunate thing is, while I like his design, I think his AI is terrible. I feel like Springtrap is very unpredictable, and not in the good way, where it's unpredictable but it's fun. Sometimes it feels like he doesn't move throughout the entire night, and I get to 6 a.m. without even seeing him, and other times he gets to my office before it reaches 1 a.m. and is very aggressive. It never feels like it's my fault when I die, because his AI, it just feels so random, and sometimes broken, while, especially with FNAF 2, and it's something I loved about Five Nights at Freddy's 2, if you were a second late, then it was your fault with how many animatronics came at you. It made every night very tense. Which, now is probably a good time to talk about the gameplay, which is kind of similar to Five Nights at Freddy's 1 and 2, where you have to look at the cameras. However, this time you have a maintenance panel that you have to use to repair the audio, video, and ventilation, because for some reason, everything in this place was just put together very poorly. So, the gameplay of this game is trying to keep Springtrap away from your office, and to do that, you play audio of Balloon Boy in order to lure Springtrap to different rooms. However, it's very hard to actually see anything because of how dark it is, and you do not have a flashlight. So you really have to look to see if Springtrap is there or in the vents, which if he is, you can't close them, so he can't get to you. However, everything takes so long to do. Whether you are sealing a vent or fixing something, it just takes so long, and it does add a little bit to the tension. I will admit, it does add to the tension. But I also just find it boring. While you sit there and you're basically just waiting, hoping that you don't get screwed over by RNG or by Springtrap's AI. You can't use the audio all the time or it breaks. At random points, the video feed will break, so you have to fix that, which overall you can work around a little bit, but the ventilation... Springtrap might be the only real threat that can kill you in this game, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have help. And that's where the Phantom animatronics come in, and I think they add most of the scares and difficulty of FNAF 3. So many times while I would be doing good, they would just show up, and shortly after Springtrap would show up and jump scare me, which it's good that they have most of the jump scares, because I don't like Springtrap's jump scare, which is just him walking up to you. Something I haven't mentioned are the phone calls that much, and mainly it's because out of the first Five Nights at Freddy's games, the first 3 Five Nights at Freddy's games, I think this game has the worst ones. FNAF 1's phone calls, they weren't anything special, but, they were interesting. They gave you a little bit of the lore and the story for, the first game. FNAF 2 is really when the phone calls actually, started being good. And, they were much more about the story and the events about the missing kids. However, Five Nights at Freddy's 3's phone calls, they're all about the Springlock suits. And I don't know, I just never found them interesting.
Employees only. This is not a break room. Should not be considered a place for employees to hide and or congregate. And under no circumstance should a customer ever be taken into this room and out of the main show area. Management has also been made aware that the Spring Bonnie animatronic has been noticeably moved. I would like to remind employees that this costume is not safe to wear under any circumstance. Thank you, and remember to smile. You are the face of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
So night 3 and 4, I think, are easy because, at least for me, and this is what I was talking about, Springtrap didn't show up once for me in both night 3 and night 4. But night 5 was actually pretty hard and challenging until Springtrap just got stuck going to the same vent I closed at the beginning of the night. So something I haven't mentioned is that at the end of every night, you have an 8-bit minigame where you play as one of the animatronics, and you follow a purple Freddy only to reach an error spot, and then purple guy comes and dismantles Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. And after beating night 5, you play as a ghost, and you can finally enter that room, and you see purple guy. So this was the big twist of Five Nights at Freddy's 3. That Springtrap, who has been haunting you every night in this game, is actually the purple guy. The man behind all the killings. And he has been haunting you all game. However, this is something I don't like about Five Nights at Freddy's 3. I think narratively, and with some of the later games as well, this twist works. Because Springtrap is, he is the man who caused the missing children incident. He is someone who is so evil, he refuses to die and is now haunting you. I do think that is scary. The problem is the gameplay doesn't help at all with that. And that's because this style of gameplay that the early Five Nights at Freddy's games has, they don't work with one-on-one, threats, which, what Scott said, that was the whole point of Five Nights at Freddy's 3. It was supposed to be a one-on-one confrontation, you versus the man behind it all, but it just doesn't work. It's why I think Five Nights at Freddy's 2 worked extremely well, because while fans of Five Nights at Freddy's 3 like to pretend that it's a problem that FNAF 2 has 20 animatronics and it's hectic and it's crazy. To me, that what makes the gameplay fun. And when you reach the end of the night, it is always rewarding because you made it through them all. However, FNAF 3's gameplay, it doesn't have the same feeling. And I never felt the same way when I beat the night, like in FNAF 2, or even later games like Sister Location. So Night 6 in this game is called Nightmare Mode, where Springtrap's AI is even more aggressive, and new Phantom animatronics appear with the Phantom Puppet, which is the most annoying thing ever. And this was the first FNAF game with multiple endings. If you just play the game, you would get the bad ending. However, you do some weird mini games things where you get from clicking on pictures or putting in a code into the wall, then you could get the good ending. And I'll just be completely honest, I did not do any of them or get any footage because, frankly, I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters. Both endings don't explain anything. They don't even give a hint or idea, but instead just tells you it's the good or bad ending depending on if the lights on the animatronics are on, which really means nothing since we had more Five Nights at Freddy's games come after this. There's also no explanation about the purple guy, which was the biggest mystery of FNAF, which, like, literally, who is this guy? Who is the purple guy? When this game came out, when MatPat was still doing game theory, he was determined it was the phone guy simply because the phone guy was literally the only other human character in this game, like in this franchise, other than us, the player. And while I never cared for that theory, the fact that the biggest question on who this guy is wasn't answered until Sister Location, a game Scott wasn't even originally planning on making, but he also told us in a book that you supposedly weren't required to read, yet it held important information like how the guy who died and took over Springtrap is named William Afton. I know throughout this video, it seemed like I don't like this game. And I've throughout this video, it seems much more like a critique and criticizing everything about the game and not liking it. But that isn't true. This game is just mediocre in my mind. It's the third game in the franchise. I don't think it's awful. But this was supposed to be the last game in the franchise. Until Scott made FNAF 4 because he thought the game wasn't scary. Which, if you think I hate this game from like how I'm talking about it, just wait till FNAF 4. I absolutely hate FNAF 4. I think it destroyed the lore. I just find this game disappointing. And, you can like this game. You can like this game. You can say it's your favorite. You can say it's the best game ever, and I don't know what I'm talking about. But I just don't see it. I don't see it. And I think it is one of the worst in the franchise. And you know how much people try and convince me, I think, like, if I had to, like, rank this with all the other Five Nights at Freddy's games, like Five Nights at Freddy's games, FNAF 3 is going to be pretty low, honestly. Either way, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all next time.